Hi, yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for this Music Declares Emergency and Rough Trade panel on music and the climate crisis. My name's Nigel Adams and I'm co-founder of Music Declares and also co-owner of Full-Time Hobby and Hassle Records. As part of the Music Declares Turn Up the Volume Week, we wanted to highlight the changes the music community are making in light of the climate crisis and see what else was possible. Is it the job of the music industry to get its house in order? Or should we be expecting the government to implement the changes needed? I'll introduce the panel and then we'll have roughly 45 minutes for discussion, followed by 15 minutes for Q&A. If anyone wants to send through panel questions for the panel, we'll have a look at those. So to introduce the panel, we have Stephen Godfrey. Stephen's co-owner, director in Rough Trade Stores and originator of the Rough Trade Album Club, as well as helping open stores in New York, Nottingham and Bristol. And then we have Hannah Peel. Hannah is a multi-talented producer, composer and self-releasing artist. And we also have Tristan. So Tristan is a co-founder of Worldwide FM alongside Giles Peterson, as well as a co-founder of Boiler Room, a DJ and a one-time record store and record label employee.
For half of Boiler Room.
That was a long time ago.
And finally, unfortunately, Peter Quick from Ninja Tunes unable to attend tonight, but luckily James Stafford from Key Production has been able to join us instead. James is an account manager at Key Production, who have been at the forefront of UK music manufacture for over 30 years, working with pressing plants throughout the UK and Europe. James is responsible for the company's sustainability strategy. Previously, he worked in A&R and artist management. Okay, great to see you, everybody. Thanks for joining this. I wanted to kick off with just an initial thought, just an idea of where everybody is on the climate crisis. Nothing too technical, really. It's just a simple, where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? So 1 being, you know, not that fussed, 10 being absolutely panicked. I just thought it'd be a good idea, just get us in the frame of mind and see where we're at. So, Stephen, how are you feeling?
I would say 10, probably. It's as kind of scared as you can be, really, whilst staying sane. I think it's, yeah, we talk further, but yeah, that's my position.
You've said it all. Tristan, how are you feeling?
I left Al's video running for like.
I mean, it's kind of hard to understand, isn't it? I mean, from 1 to 10, it's probably 10,000. You know, it's. I mean, you know, quite seriously, we seem to be, if not hitting the peak of the problem, we're definitely hitting the point where it's only heading downwards. So, you know, I'm not even sure if it's emergency or if there is a scale. It's just it's a situation we need to deal with right now.
Sure, fair point. Hannah, where are you on that scale, or is there a scale?
Yeah, I agree. There is no scale. We're at the point where there isn't any. We can't go backwards. We have to sustain where we are and improve it. There isn't. We're at that tipping point, and there's, yeah. I guess I'm not panicked, but I'm definitely massively concerned and I'm wanting and willing to make a difference and a change.
Great. And James, finally, how are you feeling?
Yeah, well, I think Hannah summed it up quite nicely, but I think that the thing to take from that is the idea that thinking it's too late to do anything, there are still things that we can look to try and dial it back down. So yeah, it's pretty much, it is almost at the verge of total panic, but let's look for a way that we can try and bring it back into some sort of focus and figure out what we can try and do, what's with it for us.
Sure. Great. Well, thanks everybody for that, kicking us off. It's I couldn't agree more, really. But to start initially, I wanted to discuss what we've been up to individually and then open up the chat to the wider music industry and what we thought could happen there. So going back to you, James, I just wanted to see what you thought was open to record labels, particularly, to be as environmentally friendly as possible.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, and a lot of plastic to make. So you're kind of in a tricky situation from the outset. But I mean, we've looked at this a lot because it's what we do. A lot of products are out there that are ending up being consumed and ending up in landfill. That's not the idea with music. Music is a product that you buy and you cherish and you hold on to. So it's more about looking at ways to make that a kind of a product for life and how you package that responsibly, and then finding ways that we can mitigate all of those parts of the process. And the one advantage that we've got in the position that we're in is because we deal with a whole bunch of different suppliers, we can keep them in part of the conversation and try and push this forward. So it's been something as a company that I know we've been doing since long before I was even involved, way back with Karen, who owns the company 10, 15 years ago, starting to look at doing ways of carbon offsetting. But over the last 2 years, certainly over the last year, it has become something that's much more at the forefront, and we're talking about it a lot more with people in terms of what we can do. We can get into some specifics, but I think it's that understanding of there's certain things you can do and certain things you can't do, but with an understanding that music's something that you want to have. You're not going to listen to it once and chuck it in the bin. It's a long-term product that is going to stay on a shelf.
Sure. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And Stephen, I mean, going to you on that, how do you feel record stores can kind of get involved, or what are the changes you've been making?
Oh, well, I think that there's a lot. I mean, there's on one level, there's the role of any retailer in terms of the responsibilities, in that, you know, you're effectively part of that consumer culture. And you could say that, you know, consumer choices are distractions from or substitutes for sort of political action, and really, you know, I suppose the role of consumers is more about inspiring, informing, sustaining political and cultural action, which I think is what's required here, systemic, you know, change. But in terms of how that works at a sort of retail level, clearly, you know, reducing waste, transportation costs, trying to lower, you know, your carbon footprint as much as you possibly can. But, you know, there's so many variables there. But specifically dealing with, you know, being a record store, we've undertaken a couple of initiatives of Rough Trade, where we are trying to work with the scientific and charity sector to reduce any waste disposal of what is typically old vinyl, so you know, used vinyl, whereas in the past that would have maybe ended up in landfill, to divert that away from landfill and to make sure it re-enters into the production chain, so it actually gets recycled into other PVC products, stuff like traffic cone bases and things like that. So we're working with Oxfam and, as I say, York University and things like that on trying to create a process there, but also trying to create a circular economy where you can take old vinyl records and create new vinyl records out of them using a chemical chemical recycling process. And we've obtaining government grants to go through that process at the moment, and we think that we can do it. But, you know, the goal being that you're effectively using old unwanted records to create, you know, new virgin vinyl, and you know, there's a terrific amount of carbon offset and benefit there. So that's what we're undertaking in the background, and then if I suppose at more of a shop level, as a community store, you know, we try to encourage and raise awareness of the climate issue. We've championed particular books. Our book of the year was sort of recently David Wallace Jones. his book, The Uninhabitable Earth, working where we can with Extinction Rebellion, and just generally trying to put it at the forefront as much as you can without trying to, distract too much. But we have a responsibility, I suppose, a platform, and we try to use that. So there's a myriad of ways that we try and address it, and some are kind of more to the fore than others at different times, but it's ongoing.
Sure, great. There's some really, really positive things going on there. And Tristan, in terms of Worldwide FM, it's been a great platform for lots of different issues. Do you see that as something going forward that Worldwide FM would embrace in terms of the environment?
No, 100%. I think we appreciate that. We have got voice in a platform, and it is our duty in some senses to raise awareness about not only the issues but events, and ways in which we can contribute as an everyday normal person. I think when I say it's kind of that 10,000, I don't mean to panic or anything like that, but it is a case where we have to research, we have to educate ourselves, we have to share knowledge. I think Worldwide FM we're in a great position where we can connect with different people from around the world and understand different ways of dealing with aspects of climate change. And so, whether that is something that's more lifestyle, which is as simple as reminding everyone how positive it is to recycle, the simple things that exist there. And then I suppose advocating, the more broader aspects of energy use, and thinking about it. I think, I definitely feel like we've been at a point where we haven't been presented with the information. The concerns of climate change, they have been on the periphery, but it's only really in the past 15, 20 years that it's been highlighted how much of a big problem it is, and how much we've been doing previously that's been wrong, without realizing. And so it's reversing habits of a lifetime in every aspect of our life. And I think through having a platform and through connecting people, all we can do is encourage the conversation to spread as far and wide as we possibly can.
That's so great, and it's kind of normalizing the conversation, isn't it, as well? Like you say, it has been on the periphery, but the fact that you can kind of be getting it out there is so important.
It's an honor to be able to do that as well. It's an honor to be able to listen to the concerns and spread it as far as we can, and to whoever will listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been great. You've offered up a platform to Music Declares, and we really appreciate that. Hannah, just turning to you, I know your latest album is concerned with ecological issues. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, firstly, it recycles material from 1972, which is an electrosonic album, which was released by KPM, the 1000 series library record, which is a Delia Derbyshire and Radiophonic Workshop album. And I guess in some senses, when I was approached to remake that record and do my own version of it, the recycling and the kind of the awareness of what they were writing about at that time in the 70s has really made me kind of refocus what this record and Furwave refers to in itself. That record referred to kind of like the science of the time, the futuristic, the industrial side, laboratories, that they were making music for documentaries and music that would sit in the background. Whereas when I started to look at the titles and the tracks for this record, it's more eco-aware. I'm not kind of making a statement about climate or anything, but I'm definitely pinpointing how the connection between music, and particularly on this record, electronic music, has that connection with nature and cycles, and just raises questions, I guess. You know, like one of the tracks is called Eco-vocative, and you know, carbon cycle, and it really plays with the artistic side of it, of how delicate and fragile a state we are in, without using lyrics, and I guess that's where I've approached it from. Yeah.
Look, it's a fantastic record, and I'm really interested in that idea of how artists treat the issue of the climate crisis. You know, is like, where do you go with that? Because there was a really interesting idea that I heard on the radio the other day about going to the moon. The first time someone went to the moon, artists had already been there, whether that be in film or in song. You know, that idea of visioning and getting to a point. You know, do you think artists should they be envisaging where we can go and helping, you know, culture move that way?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, we're a creative industry. We have to find ways creatively to make a difference and change things. And I guess the role of an artist is to highlight and speak about it and use the voice. And a bit like what Tris was saying, you know, outwardly kind of promoting and sharing companies and questioning where is this information that we can find out things, and encouraging other people to do the same. I mean, even that in itself is playing a part in making a difference. And yeah, I mean, we've all got creative brains, so it's just finding a way through it that works for everyone, I think, is the best way I can look at it anyway.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, people think artists are cool, aren't they? And you know, they do what cool people do. You know, so it's kind of like, that guy's doing that. Like, maybe I should get a train instead of a plane. You know, it really is quite as simple as that. Sometimes it's kind of like just well, not setting an example, but showing that it's like it's normal. You know.
Yeah, and like there's so many, like, you know, like Manu Delago has been doing, or well, he was planning, I think he's gone back to doing it now, the bicycle tour, and they go around. I think they're doing parts of Europe totally with the gear, everything on bikes. I mean, good on him. I couldn't have the fitness to keep that up, but you know, it's highlighting a story, it's making something and everybody else aware. And you know, if there's ways to tour that are more carbon neutral, or there's ways to kind of make that work, no matter how big an artist or how small you are, I'm all for finding that and creating that energy and buzz that we need to keep driving it forward.
Brilliant. Yeah, and it's it felt to me there was a certain point when musicians dealing with the climate crisis or the environment, say 20, 30 years ago, was a specific genre. You know, it may be seen as like new agey or hippie or whatever. Do you feel like it can go into every genre? Do you feel like everybody can deal with it?
Yeah, there's no excuse. We're at that point where it does not matter what genre, who you are. We were all of the same species, and we're going to notice too much of a change not to have separation. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really a side to take, is there? You know, I mean, we do talk about climate deniers, but I don't really know any. You know, I think everyone agrees that there's a problem, and we need to do what we can. You know, I mean, you know, yeah, that is obviously doing like there's that huge pressure that the world might end. Like, the world might end, but you know, there is also a reason that goes alongside it, and you know, taking people with you. You know, I think sometimes, I think maybe in the 70s it was used. You know, they were viewed as hippies, they were viewed as outsiders. It was like, that's what they do. They're doing that. I'm not doing that. That kind of vibe. Whereas it has to be absolutely inclusive. You know, it's not a conversation we can have in Europe and then not talk to China about it, or not embrace the issues in Africa. You know, it's not a binary thing. Like, it's not for the hippies. Like,
do you think because of the privileged position we have in Britain, and also the history we've got of kind of the Industrial Revolution, what have you, it's even more important that we stand up, you know, culturally and musically, and kind of get the word across?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think I mean, it really depends. You know, I think there's, you know, there's obviously some artists out there who don't see that as their responsibility, and that's their right as an artist, as a human being. You know, they want to display other stuff through their art. But you know, I think if it is something that concerns you, and you feel that is your responsibility, then and you have people listening to what you're saying, and you have Instagram or Twitter accounts that people retweet and quote, then yeah, I believe you should be more responsible about it. I wouldn't follow somebody who's irresponsible about it. You know, I wouldn't advocate somebody who, and that's just a natural response now. And you know, it's such a big issue that it is kind of like, okay, well, that's a bit weird. I'm deleting that.
Yeah. Just moving back to the kind of more micro level of the music industry and kind of the physical product. One of the initiatives that we were getting involved with a few other labels was this idea of near mint. And I know particularly you, Tristan, and obviously Stephen running a record shop currently. That idea that, you know, there are some records that get bent or out of shape and cosmetically kind of a bit bust up, but we could sell them. It's like, it's a small thing, like you were saying with recycling, it's something we could do. Do you think that's beneficial? Do you think it could be part of the whole spectrum of ways of coping, or do you think it's a cul-de-sac?
Yeah, you go ahead, Steve.
I think it's definitely worth doing. I think you've got to look at everything and do as much as you possibly can. So even if in itself it doesn't, you know, have a significant impact, I think that when you add it up with everything else, I think it can contribute a lot. And I think that it's as much to do with, as you say, kind of educating and instilling a kind of train of thought, an approach, how to interpret, how to not just consume music, but how you know, purchase in general, and then kind of informing your kind of approach to purchasing decisions in general. So I think that it's definitely a worthwhile initiative, and you know, we would certainly look to embrace it as best we can. I think executing it in store has its challenges, but you know, without wanting to get bogged down into the detail here, I think, you know, overall, I think it's certainly something that we would welcome and support. So yeah.
Cool, great. And Tristan, what do you think about, you know, there is a big collector culture, and you know, I know with our label, people want stuff pristine, and that's fine, but there's also like, you want to just play the record. And how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great. I understand how, from a record store point of view, it might be difficult. But you know, without kind of passing the buck or what have you, you know, it feels a little bit like it breaks down to that culture of needing something that's like fresh and brand new the whole time. And you know, a 30-year-old record that's mint, like, as if it's never been played. And it's like, well, I mean, you know, if it's a great record, then inevitably it's going to be played. And I think, you know, I've got so many records here from when I was in the record shop and then DJing, and you know, I'd pick up like, I don't know, 10, 12s in the shop to play them 4 times max. And then they haven't been played again in 15, 20 years. And in a way, I kind of feel guilty giving it to somebody, and it's not, because it's not brand new. You know, but the music and the art is still encased within it. And I mean, you know, I think if the quality of the sound is still there, you know, and the scratches aren't making it unbearable, you know, that, you know, I think, yeah, I mean, we should be recycling records rather than repressing.
The appetite for used music is huge.
Sure.
You know, used vinyl right now is absolutely massive. We reopened recently, as all non-essential stores did. We now have vintage vinyl, as we call it, section in the stores. We predominantly sell new, but the vintage vinyl was, you know, proportionately the most popular section in the stores, you know, coming back from you know, the lockdown. You know, the appetite for vintage vinyl, if you want to call it that, is is definitely there, and I don't think consumers, music lovers are afraid of picking up something that might be a bit frayed or whatever, as long as you say, the record in itself is in great condition. So yeah, I think that this is a sort of initiative that can take advantage of that, but there are kind of retail challenges, I say, in terms of how does it sit between new, used, and
I mean, you can just imagine the record buying market coming up and pointing out, you didn't say that this scratch was here. I didn't know that.
But, it's important. I mean, for me, I think that this is an emergency situation, and we work in a creative industry, and we've got to try and work with all divisions of it, all the different silos, and kind of work together as much as we can to encourage people to force that political change, that systemic change. It's not going to happen. We're not going to address this huge challenge unless it happens on that scale. And I don't think music is going to in itself obviously create the necessary changes, but I think what we can definitely do, working with artists, labels, every single aspect, is to really encourage people to protest and to stand up and demand the changes that need to be made, and they need to be made 10 years ago, not tomorrow. So the emergency is overwhelming, but we've got to do what we can do.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I feel like with all those small changes, though, like, you don't have to be a vegan, you don't have to not fly, but little changes that do signal a want for a better environment, keep reminding you of that. As long as they don't take away from the fact it's an emergency, like you say, which it is. Just going back, James, on the physical side of things, do you want to just kind of walk us through some of the things that's with vinyl? Like, people talk about recycled vinyl. Now, what is that? If I buy a record that's calling itself recycled, is it recycled, or what is it? Oh, I think you might be frozen. Hello, James.
Yeah, sorry, it dropped out there.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, in terms of, just going back to physical, like, records, you see nowadays more and more labels are offering like recycled vinyl. What is that? Can you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it ties into what Stephen was discussing, but it's something, I mean, effectively the process of making a record, you end up with a lot of spare plastic that ordinarily would be, I think back in the day, would have been simply thrown away. Everybody, all of our plants that we work with have got a lot better about bringing that back in to be recycled, whether it is to a traffic cone or to a gas pipe or whatever, or car dashboards. I mean, we've got plants in Germany who probably sell most of it straight to Volkswagen. But the point is, every single record ends up with the trimmings off the edge chucked in a big bucket. That can be reground and reused and make recycled vinyl. And if you take the coloured pieces of vinyl that are left over, you end up with this fantastic, and I know, Nigel, you know this very well because you've done a whole bunch of these, you end up with a fantastic set of uniquely coloured recycled vinyl records. So it not only is it reusing stuff that otherwise would be turned into something or thrown away, it's a really nice piece of vinyl. And based on what we've looked at, it doesn't really sound that much different than a standard bit of coloured vinyl, which ordinarily doesn't sound maybe quite as good as black vinyl, but it's still, for all intents and purposes, absolutely perfectly fine from a fidelity perspective. So, I mean, I think it's a great way of highlighting the fact that we can bring that vinyl back into the production chain, reuse it and get it out to consumers. It's something that pretty much everybody's doing. I mean, some plants actually will use recycled vinyl as a matter of course, because they actually say that it's going to improve the sound of the vinyl. But each plant has got its own set of presses and its own effective PVC recipe that it's going to use. But it's something that we've seen more and more people bringing on. Of course, the constraining factor is it's using up the leftovers. So you can't just do that, if you see what I'm saying. You can't just do recycled vinyl because it has to be the bit left over from those main runs.
I mean, in terms of that physical production, Hannah, you're a self-releasing artist, and you've seen that process now. How did that make you feel about it? Did you learn anything from the albums you've released, or knowing the production side maybe more than some artists do?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because yeah, I'm very much in charge of what we do, but being kind of self-released is, you know, you're working with a budget and you have to work with the best budget you can, and sometimes the choices aren't there. When with this record, I didn't use recycled vinyl, although it was on my mind to do it, just because of the time that it took to press at the moment, which I think at the moment was about 5 months, and I didn't know what the quality was going to be like, and it was really hard to kind of judge, because I don't have an infrastructure around me to support if anything goes wrong or times are moved. So it's nice to hear, James, you talk about the quality of it, because I was told from whoever I used that the quality wasn't great, and that's over, but that's not in Britain, that's over in like the Czech Republic. So but it's definitely, you know, like not used plastic dual CDs for years, wouldn't ever go near them anymore. In fact, didn't even choose to print up a CD this time, because, you know, one of the previous things when I first started out was like, you get a load of stock and then you're still sat with that stock and you don't know what to do with it. And you end up sometimes just chucking it. And I hated that. I hated it so much. But those early records, you know, that they just weren't going to sell. And and so this record, we were really specific with, we're only printing this amount. And what we've done actually is we've sold it completely out. And then we're left with the demand of like, are you going to do more? I think that's how to cope with that.
It's a really interesting point, because 75% of our online sales are pre-order. And I think that so much of vinyl now is, you know, it does sell out. So, you know, there isn't this sort of waste at the end of it, as you say. And I think that that's a really interesting development with, you know, with the rise of e-commerce, obviously. So, you know, that's definitely a positive move.
Yeah, I think, and you know, on our chat, somebody was asking what to do if you've got any tips and advice for anybody kind of starting out. And I would say that not to do what a lot of people do, which is print up 1,000 and then and then just sit with them. I think you've just got to be more realistic and aware of that you're going to be ending up with boxes and boxes sat at home, and you might chuck them out, which is the wrong approach to have, really.
And it's the tough one, because I know that for a little artist, looking at the price of 500 versus 1,000, you're saying, well, look how much more I get for that extra investment.
Yeah.
But then if you know, and we've been through this conversation so many times, and it's frustrating. You think, oh, I could have sold another 200, I could have sold another 300, which is a big deal when you've got that number of copies, but you've still got 200-300 left over at the end, which are going to sit somewhere or end up being taken to landfill, which is just the absolute worst possible thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we have these conversations regularly, don't we, James, about stock quantities and, you know, trying to get it right. And it's really
difficult. You're never always going to get it right, but it's really counterintuitive to try and underestimate in a way. But it does mean that you've got that fantastic. It's like, I don't know, it's like managing an artist. You put on a show and you let that show sell out, and then you put the second night on sale, right? You don't put them both on at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a similar kind of, a bit easier when you've got a show to worry about, but the principle still stands, right? It's great to leave people wanting more a little bit, make it a rare thing, make it something exciting that people want to track down, that then is going to end up back in Stephen's shop in the vintage vinyl rack.
Yeah. Is there any pressing plants out there that are really looking into the way they run and what energy and things that they're running off?
It massively varies, and some plants are doing a brilliant job and some are dragging behind. We've got plants that already can offer carbon offsetting. We've got plants that can do that really massively invested in that. And we've got to remember, it's a really industrial process making vinyl. It hasn't really changed that much since it was invented back in whatever 30s. So it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of heat, it takes a lot of water. but you can do what you can to try and do what you can to improve the boiler system, have a closed loop water system, look to green energy sources, which is something that's come up loads on the chat, and it's a really critical thing to do, which then ties back into kind of a government level discussion. But there are a lot of plants that are really, really conscious of that they are using a lot of energy, and they're doing their best to mitigate that. The position that we have is that we can try and drag the rest along as well. So that's really what we're trying to do at this point, sort of show what the shining examples are and encourage everybody else to bring themselves along with that, and find the ways to minimize. Really, all we can do is minimize the impacts on everything that we're doing.
Sure.
Yeah. There's that company in the Netherlands, in the Green Vinyl Records, and they claim to reduce the energy involved in pressing a record by 60%, and use injection molding instead of pressing.
I mean, injection molding is really old school, and I'm not sure the pressing quality is quite as good. There's so many out there, and fundamentally what it comes down to is the PVC that has to be used, and as yet nobody's found anything better than what is effectively a complete fossil fuel based product. There's people out there looking at stuff that are trying to find ways of a different granulate that's made of something else, and there are people that think they've got something that could work. I've seen the round and about HD vinyl looking at different ways for the galvanics process, which is the bit before you start pressing, which is really chemical intensive. Different ways of doing that using ceramic plates. Nothing's really come forward, and the problem is you've got plants that are stuck with technology that they've been using for decades that they can only really upgrade incrementally. So, I mean, I know I've just seen a link come up. They are really good, but actually you look into what they're saying, and a lot of other plants are doing the same thing. So a lot of plants get a bit sniffy when they make all these great claims, when actually a lot of it's standard practice.
Sure. We just got another 5 minutes before we go to answering some of these questions from the audience, but I just wanted to bring up another aspect of the music industry. I'm sure everybody's aware that this week the Beggars Group and Ninja have announced their kind of emissions reductions, which is fantastic, and it's a real kind of game changer, I think. I was digging into the Beggars report and looking at that, and they were talking about the emissions they need to cut. 11% of their overall emissions are like staff travel and travel in general, which they are looking to reduce. Now, I think, particularly post-COVID, when nobody has been able to travel, how do we feel about that? How do we think the industry is going to develop in terms of, travel for gigs or travel for A&R or DJing or any of that kind of thing? I mean, Tristan, what's your view on that? Do you think things will change?
Yeah, I think so. I think they were kind of moving towards changing before we hit the pandemic. I think, as with a lot of things, the pandemic has, it sped things up. It sped up our understanding. It sped up, I think if you said to everyone this time last year, you're not going to be able to travel for 12 months to any gigs or to any meetings, they're looking like you're crazy. I mean, I know that I had gigs around the world. I'd just come back from Mexico at this time last year, and I was planning on going to Dubai and places like that. Now I think I'm like, wow, that's a weird world. And I think, the temptation is to fall back into that, and obviously doing gigs and festivals puts a quick buck in your back pocket if you're a DJ or performer. But I think, it's an overall situation, isn't it? I think, we can take a stand, we can sit here, but, another DJ or another band may not care and go for it. So, I think it is about being as responsible as you can. I mean, I don't think you can cut out all travel. I think obviously we've also learned that face-to-face contact is really important, and people coming together in one place is important. So it is balancing it out. It's not saying, right, you can't travel from now on, but it is about asking that question: can I get there by train? Maybe we could do a cycle trip to it. Maybe 4 of us can get in the car instead of, you know, 2 people across, like 4 people across 2 cars. You know, I think it's people power at the end of the day, isn't it? You know, music is powered by the people. So, you know, if you know, the attendance, you know, kind of move with their feet in that sense, you know, and also stand by the festivals that are looking after environmental rights, thinking about it, addressing it. You're never going to get it perfect. You're never going to address every single situation, but you know, I feel there needs to be a statement of intent from this point forward. And you know, in as far as meetings and gigs, yeah, I think as well as COVID, as well as the health, you know, concerns that have come in, coupled with the environmental concerns, I think there is a brand new future in that sense for us, because there are so many different levels of like needing to think about. Like, okay, well, and we've got Brexit now in the UK, you know, so there's a few different layers of paperwork and thought process, and have I got the right mask, and you know, you know, will I be in the right kind of aisle? And you know, I'm not going to give away any names, but we did have a member of staff who went to the pub at the weekend and was in the pub with somebody who had COVID and now has to isolate for 10 days. Oh, wow. And you know, that is the reality of what we will be facing when we come out of this. You know, it's not a case of just jumping around, hugging everybody, and you know, flying from Asia to Europe 4 times in the space of 3 months, because it will generate a massive carbon footprint, and we know that now. We didn't know that before. We know that now.
No, I really agree with you. It's got to be a mixture of things, hasn't it? But it's also, I find it interesting that during the lockdown, obviously when all emissions or a lot of emissions dropped, it only dropped 5%. But in reality, to actually keep within the Paris Accord, we've got to drop 7% a year. So it's obviously so much bigger. Do you know what I mean? It's like you've got to look to the fossil fuel industries, haven't you, really? And the governments to bring those kind of things in. We can all make our changes, but there's some big changes that have got to be beyond us. Like you were saying, Stephen, the lobbying and the activism that can come in on top of that. Yeah, how do you feel about that, Hannah, as a touring artist? You know, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I actually moved from London to Northern Ireland like 2.5 years ago, and the first year of that was flights, commuting completely. And you know, every time I went back, I felt bad about it. And actually, I've survived a whole year where I haven't had to commute, and I've done more work than I've ever had. So, in some ways, you know, I hope it stays like this. I hope there is less flights, there is less things to do, but then also my job has changed slightly, that I'm not touring as much, but I'm definitely more aware that I don't want to be doing gigs like how I used to, in terms of going from venue to venue. I would rather find and work with companies that are willing to find a new way of bringing shows to places that are using new technology, like surround sound and projections, or some kind of visualization that makes an audience feel like they are part of that show in some respect. And I think that it could be a really exciting thing, because it would cut costs down for big gigs being toured with or wherever, and enable you to reach more audiences actually effectively without having to travel as much.
Sure.
I guess one of the big things is, you know, like when you are contracted to play a festival or something, a lot of the time it is in there that you can't play in the same city or the same country. And that in itself is a bad model, because you're just flying out with loads of stuff and doing one gig and then flying back because you can't stay in that same place. So, you know, maybe that's something we need to start promoting. We need to start kind of getting in some ways a code of conduct for the industry, in terms of like what kind of things we can aim for.
Sure. Yeah. A sea change. It feels like from what everybody's saying, we need that kind of like music community unity to be able to move forward, because there's so many aspects that have got to be dealt with, haven't there? That's really interesting. Thanks very much. I'll just turn to the audience and see, we've got a few questions coming in, and we've got Honley asking, I'm curious to know if there are well-known climate change campaigns with music artists. Just a general question. Anybody got any particular on that?
I do, but I have to very quickly look into my email just to
Sure.
get the right name. Bear with me for a moment. We were speaking to some guys that were working with Greenpeace. Bear with me for a moment. Here we go. DJs for climate action. And they've got Earth Night coming on this Sunday, in fact.
Great.
They're broadcasting from New York, Mexico City, New York, earthnight.org. And I had a look into it. I was looking into it, and it was basically for any producers. They've basically got a whole bunch of samples of fun stuff like the sound of the Amazon forest, and jungle sounds, and you can edit it and submit it and be on a compilation with reputable producers.
That's great. Thanks, Tristan. And we've got Tom from MDE mentioned 1975. Obviously, you've been doing quite a lot with Greta as part of their campaign. We've got a couple directed to you, James. What about the disposable plastic that vinyl is wrapped in from Sarah Levine? Shrink wrap.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, and again, Nigel, we talked about this loads. It's a nasty thing, and it is something that mostly ends up in the bin. My personal perspective is it can end up being a little bit of a red herring, in the sense that we've done some numbers, and I'd say that the difference for the shrink wrap maybe adds 3% to the carbon impact of an order. Whereas, and it's something else we talked about, heavyweight versus standard weight vinyl, that's 30%, just in terms of the sheer amount of plastic. So choose your targets. It's something that we need to look at, and we've worked with Full-Time Hobby to come up with an overbag, which becomes part of the product. It becomes a dust sleeve for the record, and it keeps distributors happy, because distributors are the ones that exist on this, and it then ties back into the idea that the record's getting damaged. The idea is it reduces damage, so therefore you have to have some layer of protection. I did notice that Tesco's are actually offering going to be offering an in-store recycling service for all shrink wrap. So that would include any of this, because I know that's one of the big bugbears is it is recyclable. It's just how do you do it? So that's something else to sort of throw into the mix. Recycling options that are out there. I would say, yeah, basically decide on, try and prioritize what the biggest targets on what you've got. Where can you make the biggest impact? It may not be with the shrink wrap, as long as you can figure out a way to actually get that out and bring it back in for recycling at the end of the life of the product.
Sure. Great. Thanks, James. And then Hannah, we've got Lewis May asking, just wondering if the panel have any advice, tips, suggestions that unsigned artists, bands can practically do to reduce their carbon footprint or their audiences. That's a big one, but any particular aspect to that, do you think?
Yeah, I guess what we were saying earlier about the printing of things and choosing wisely what format you print on and how many you do, and making sure that you get your pre-orders maybe set up first so that you don't have to print extra, that you maybe sell them all before it goes live, or at least 70%. I can't really it's hard, because when you're an independent artist, and if we go back to how it was with touring, the part of that and getting out there is traveling to different shows and doing a lot of different shows all over the place, and that is part of your promo. It is part of your that's why I think that if there's a way to do the live streaming and develop that in a way that makes it more accessible, so it's not just from your sofa, that it's like a beautiful show that you can then promote, then that would make it easier. There would be more people that you could reach without having to go to Oxford, then go all the way to Inverness, you know, to do all the little gigs that do make a difference and do count. I guess that's one thing, you know, and also when you're looking at touring and doing things, that sometimes to look at the budgets first and make a, you know, if you're going to do a show that's for 50 quid, but you got to travel 150 miles, is that really worth it?
Great. Yeah, that's really good ideas there. And also mental health for artists, isn't it? If you could, that idea you're talking about, hybrid gigs, maybe some stream, some live. Heavy touring schedules do put a lot of pressure on artists' mental health, don't they? So it can kind of help with that too. Stephen, there's a question here from Manon Thomas saying, is it conceivable to picture the entire music industry, from bands to labels to stores, setting industry-wide climate targets that all professionals have to commit to? And if yes, how do you get there? Do we need authority voices, not authority bodies, to take the lead?
I think it'd be hard to. I think it'd be hard to sort of set standards that are actually sort of meaningful in a way. I think there needs to be a kind of encouragement for everyone to make as much change as they possibly can. I do feel that the large artists, those artists that, you know, can sell out the larger venues, I think that, and reach those larger audiences, they in some ways have the platform and also the luxury to kind of tour less, and, you know, like the sort of Nick Cave event where, you know, you had him playing at Alexandra Palace, and, you know, huge success from a streaming point of view. And if more artists of that stature can develop, you know, kind of, if you like, substitute the sort of touring side of things with initiatives like that, I think that would definitely help. And I think you get this sort of trickle down. I think that it's definitely tougher for the smaller bands that don't have that level of following to kind of to create that sort of change. And that's where it's important for labels and retailers and everyone to do what we can, you know, as you say, sort of collectively. But I think it is quite hard to sort of set actual standards, but, you know, I'm open for it.
Sure. Do you think the government, you know, as a body should be legislating, should be bringing that forward to deal with businesses, to kind of give them the reason?
Yeah, I think you know, business sectors, retail and so forth, yeah, they definitely should have you know, so I think constraints and limits on things like waste, and, you know, where it's possible to sort of have true and accurate carbon footprint calculations, there should be limits there, I think. And I think, you know, the transportation side of retail is a huge area that I think should, you know, has a ton of inefficiency, and, you know, we should be looking to encourage far less kind of road distribution, and not returning products that are unsold, and looking to sell, you know, mark them down rather than return them, initiatives like that. And it's not just for record stores, but for all retail. But so yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so just to kind of round everything up, I wanted to leave people with kind of positive ideas. And, you know, we all know that it's pretty desperate times we're living in, and, you know, we need to act fast, but we also need to keep positive and upbeat, and, you know, to move forward, to kind of seize opportunities that we've been talking about here. I just wanted to go round to everybody and just see, you know, what they would suggest to the audience as one thing that, you know, if they could do anything, what change they would make. Do you want to kick off with that, Hannah?
Yeah, I guess in some ways, like, you know, there's so many things you could do. I mean, one of the first things I would say is, if anybody is attending a festival or going anywhere, that in the future you see that copious amounts of plastic being, you know, make a point about not buying beer from a plastic thing that is recycled. Maybe take your own, or buy, you know, quite a few of the festivals that would be more eco-friendly, like say WOMAD or something, you have to purchase a cup and then you reuse that cup. But then the bigger ones, like kind of like Reading and things like that, are, you know, the waste that comes from them. So I think just being more socially conscious about that would really help as a consumer. As an artist, I kind of feel that maybe things like your riders, things that where there is waste, where there is things that you could really make a change on, so there is less rubbish, there is less fuel being used, there is less, I think those are all kind of realistic things right now, until there is a massive and a bigger picture. I guess like one of the things I don't want to kind of throw away is that because we are creatives, we can come up with new ways, we can talk about things and make a difference positively and encourage others. And if you have a voice, to use that and not be seen as it, like what we spoke at the beginning, as it being kind of new age or hippie. This is us right now, and it is cool to make a point about this.
Sure, brilliant, great, thanks for that, Hannah. Tristan, what's your kind of lasting thought you want to leave people with?
I suppose it's just about adding it to your agenda in general. I mean, I know for me personally, it hasn't been a second thought. You know, it's not a case of like, oh, okay, I'm going to go and do this gig or whatever it is in my life that I'm doing. I'm going to get a drink from the bar, and it's, you know, I haven't entertained the thought of having a recyclable cup up until recently. So, you know, as we've been saying, that there's no limit to the steps that we can take. But at the same time, we can't take every step at the same time. And so for me, you know, my positive thought, and I may, you know, share that with whoever else doesn't, is just to add it into your thought process. And as Hannah was saying, you know, do I need to go and do this gig? What is the environmental impact, rather than, am I going to make enough money? You know, it comes into the thought process, because it is as important. Yeah. You know, it is as important now, you know, and this is, you know, as the social discourse has increased, you know, and issues such as equal rights, you know, health, and what have you, are higher in our agenda now. We just need to maintain it and keep it going and educate ourselves more, and spread information as much as you possibly can.
Sure, absolutely. Stephen, what's your thought?
I think, you know, just try and you know, demand and, you know, ask for as much political change as you possibly can. I think is at the forefront. And I mentioned this book before, The Uninhabitable Earth, by David Wallace Wells. I think that, you know, if anyone hasn't read that yet, I would definitely, you know, highly recommend it. I think it is, you know, a fantastic wake up call for just exactly how grave this situation is. And I think, you know, it is really something that inspires you to take personal and, you know, to take personal action, and to encourage it from those that you know, friends and family and so forth. So,
sure. Great, thanks. And James, finally, what would you like to finish on?
Yeah, well, it just ties in with what everybody else is saying. I've just been thinking about this idea of moral licensing, which is this kind of concept where you can, if you change your behavior positively in one way, it excuses you to carry on behaving exactly as you were in all the other ways. That's not what this is about. It's about a kind of a total mindset change, and it's a holistic approach. Yeah. Stephen's absolutely right. There's much more that we can do in terms of approaching government, but there's so many different areas of everything you do in terms of business and in terms of your personal life that you can do to make those small changes, to understand that you're, you know, individually, maybe we're not going to be able to make that huge change, but there's still so much we can do that's going to move us towards that change. And I think it's that kind of mindset, mind shift, that's going to allow us to keep moving that momentum forward to actually get something moving and happening.
Sure. Brilliant. And I just wanted to leave, just a thought about music. I was listening to, there's a really powerful environmentalist called Rob Hopkins who started up the transition towns for Totnes. And he's an amazing change maker. And when you listen to him talking, the big impact on his life when he was a teenager was punk, was music. It really just changed his life and made him want to get involved and do things. And I think anybody that's involved in music should just remember how important it is to people. And it's, it's a medicine, and it's an absolute like societal changer. So, I really appreciate everybody getting involved in this and taking part. And just say, yeah, thanks to all the audience for coming along, and anybody getting involved in our Turn Up the Volume week this week. If you want to follow what we do as Music Declares, please just check on the website, sign our declaration, and tweet and socials as Turn Up the Volume, and also No Music on a Dead Planet. We really appreciate the support. Thanks a lot to Rough Trade for hosting this, and yeah, finally thanks to the panelists, and hopefully see you guys again soon.
Thank you for having me. Us.
I would just like to jump on and say a huge and sincere thank you from all of us at Rough Trade, to all of our guests and to everyone watching at home as well. We'll continue to present a selection of these Rough Trade Zoom webinar events, so please keep a check on the Twitter, Instagram and website, as well as the DICE app for more announcements. Our next event will be on Friday with field music. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you.